For decades, we've heard about how the world's biggest companies play this kind of global shell game to legally pay as little tax as possible. Well, guess what? The rules for that game have just been totally rewritten. Today, we're going to break down a tax reform that's been a century in the making. And we're going to tackle one simple but absolutely massive question. Have governments around the world finally managed to team up and put a stop to corporate tax avoidance for good? So here's how we're going to get to the bottom of this. First, we need to understand the sheer scale of the problem. Then we'll dig into the new global rule designed to fix it. We'll ask if it's really a move toward fairness, we'll look at the loopholes that are still there, and then we'll deliver our final verdict. Okay, so first up, let's really unpack the core issue here. For years, multinational corporations have gotten incredibly good at this global shell game, legally shuffling their profits all over the world to pay the absolute minimum in taxes. The official name for this is profit shifting. A company makes a ton of money in a country with, say, a 25% tax rate, but then, through some really clever accounting, that same profit magically shows up in a country with a 0% tax rate. It's incredibly complex, but for the longest time, it's been perfectly legal. And the scale of this it's staggering. By 2019, academic studies were estimating that more than a third, a full 37%, of all profits made by multinational companies were being shifted to tax havens. Think about that for a second. The cost? Well, it's immense. According to the OECD, all this profit shifting adds up to around $200 billion in lost tax revenue, and that's just from non-OECD countries. We're often talking about lower-income nations that really rely on that corporate tax money to fund basic public services. So what's the result of all this? Well, while the official corporate tax rate in a lot of countries might be 20 or 25%, some of the biggest, most profitable companies in the world were paying effective tax rates as low as 3 or 4%. So, how did the world finally fight back? Well, after years and years of this, governments finally got together to coordinate a response. And what they came up with is pretty much the biggest global tax reform in modern history. This response was called the OECD/G20's Project on Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, or BEPS for short, and this was a huge deal. For the first time ever, you had over 140 countries all coming together to completely rewrite the rules of international taxes. And right at the heart of this entire reform is one single crucial number, 15%. This is the new global minimum effective tax rate. It's the new floor for corporate taxes everywhere. So how do they enforce this? Through a pretty clever mechanism called Pillar 2. Basically, if a company pays only, say, 5% tax in some tax haven, its home country can step in and add a 10% top-up tax to get it to that 15% minimum. Suddenly, the whole incentive to shift profits just disappears. This is a massive shift in thinking. For decades, we had a race to the bottom, where countries were constantly trying to undercut each other with lower tax rates to attract business. Now we're moving to a system with a global tax floor, which pretty much ends that race. So, what does this actually mean for global fairness? Especially for those economies that have been losing out for so long. Let's take a look at the potential impacts. The positive side of the coin could be huge. The whole thing is designed to boost tax revenue, especially for lower-income countries where a lot of the actual production happens. And by taking away the benefits of profit shifting, it helps create a much more level playing field for everyone. Now, you might think, wait, if you take away the tax incentives, won't you just scare off investment? But actually, some projections show the exact opposite. With this new stability and predictability, foreign direct investment is actually projected to increase in places like sub-Saharan Africa by 2.4 to 4%. But of course, it's not that simple. This new system is not perfect. The game isn't over just yet. Let's look at the loopholes and the challenges that are still out there. Experts like Professors Devereux and Perry have pointed out a pretty big risk here. While that 15% rate is designed to be a floor, it could accidentally become a ceiling. Companies might just shift their focus to hitting exactly 15%, using new forms of creative accounting instead of paying the higher rates in the countries where they actually operate. And yeah, other challenges are still there. A really big one is the arm's length principle. That's the rule that says different parts of the same company have to charge each other fair market prices. It's a key tool against profit shifting, but it's still a huge gray area and super hard to enforce. Plus, a lot of low-income countries just don't have the resources for these incredibly complex audits, and there are still major legal hurdles to get this thing fully implemented everywhere. Okay, so after weighing this historic reform against all of its challenges, let's go back to that original question and try to land on a final verdict. The expert consensus seems pretty clear. On the one hand, this is, without a doubt, a massive step forward. It's a landmark moment for global tax cooperation. But on the other hand, we have to see it for what it is, a pragmatic compromise shaped by politics. It's not a perfect, airtight solution. So is corporate tax avoidance over? The short answer is no. But, and this is a big but, it is being seriously constrained. The era of multi-billion-dollar companies paying close to zero taxes is very likely coming to an end. The rules of the game have fundamentally changed, and probably for good. And all this leaves us with one final, much bigger question. The rules have definitely evolved to curb the worst abuses. But is this compromise really enough to build a truly fair global economy? Well, that's going to be the big debate for the next decade.